organization about things that are going on, things you'd like to get people's attention on. Maybe we'll do that now. Anybody?
Me.
Who's
Hi,
me?
Katie. It's Katie.
Oh,
I have an
Katie,
announcement.
You're in one of those sills, right? What's a sill?
Okay.
Well, oh.
Technical difficulties. So
Okay,
he's gonna call in just a second. The picture it's just a picture. It's not his video. So that's why.
So I am from Accessible Resources for Independence. We are the SIL that serves Howard and Anne Arundel counties, and we are going to be hiring. So I just want to put a word out there that we're hiring for a 30-hour per week position. The pay will be, I'm being very transparent these days, $18 per hour, and it will be for nursing facility transition specialist. So we're hoping to have this person in place, hired, ready to roll beginning of August. So if you know anyone who is interested, the best place to find this information is on our Facebook page. I haven't posted it yet, but it'll be coming soon. So that's Accessible Resources for Independence.
And does this person hopefully need have like a nursing home history of some sort, or institutional, have been in an institution or something like that, or not?
Yes, it is a preferred qualification because this position mentors people who are in nursing facilities on the ways in which they can leave and skills that they might need to know. So it's best, of course, if a person has walked the walk and talked the talk. And that'll all be in the position description. So happy to answer any questions anyone might have offline. But thank you for letting me share. I'm very excited.
Good. Yeah. Anyone else have announcements from your organization that you'd like to get out to the public?
You want me to update you on the presenter?
On the adventure?
Want me to do the introduction first, Sarah?
Well, it is an adventure, but the presenter, Richard, is calling in on his phone. He's having some issues. So
would you like me to do the introduction first, Sarah? We didn't get to that yet.
Hang on. I'm not sure if he's on yet.
Oh, okay, sure.
Thank you, Heather, for sharing that.
There's a phone.
Welcome.
There's a phone number that just logged in. Is that Richard?
It could, if it's a phone number that just logged in, it's probably him.
Just needs to unmute.
I can't tell which one.
There's a 443 number. Is that the one you're talking about, Mike?
Yeah.
Is that the newest number?
There's a 410 number. There's a 240 number. Wow, there's a bunch of people on the phone. Like we were talking about earlier, if any of you who are on the phone, well, you can't change what it shows, so I guess you just have to be stuck with being on the phone.
But I need Richard. Heather, you want to unmute and then see if we can get Richard real quick, figure out who he is?
I'm unmuting. So who?
You can also press *6, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Richard, if you could announce yourself, we're trying to figure out who you are.
I'm unmuting all the telephone numbers.
Okay, should I turn off my computer also and just use the phone?
Oh, yeah.
Is this Richard here?
This is Richard, so rename
Yes,
410562.
All right. Yeah, you can just disconnect that computer or whatever. It didn't work.
I apologize, folks.
No, not to worry. It's not your fault.
Thank you, Richard.
I've got to push myself into the world of technology.
Just a wee bit further here in 2020. All right, I think are we ready to get started? We have about 40 people on the call, Richard, since you're not going to be able to see that at the moment. So we're going to go ahead and Lydia is going to kick things
off.
Okay.
I cut everything off on the computer.
Okay.
All right. Well, welcome, and I'm going to turn it over to Lydia. Lydia, and you can take it away, Lydia.
All right. Well, my name is Lydia Beliowska. I'm the Executive Director of Southern Maryland Center for Independent Living. We are the center serving St. Mary's, Charles, and Calvert counties in beautiful Southern Maryland. It's a hot day today here. And I just wanted to remind everybody that the program is being recorded and it will be posted on YouTube. Also, for those of you who don't know, IAM stands for Independence Amplified Maryland, and we would love for all people with disabilities in Maryland to be able to say, I am in charge, I am independent. So thank you so much for being on the call today. We are Centers for Independent Living, and we are the best place for individuals with disabilities to come for information, referral, services, any disability resources that they need in the state of Maryland. And now I'm going to pass it on to Sarah, who's going to introduce our speaker today. Thank you.
Great, thanks. So good afternoon. We are so excited to have Richard Allen with us. And Richard is the Director of Equal Opportunity and ADA Coordination at the Maryland Department of Natural Resources. He's served as the Equal Opportunity Administrator for the past 15 years. And 5 years, previously worked for the Maryland Aviation Administration Office of Fair Practices at BWI for 5 years before that. So he's got a long term here in public service with the Maryland state government. So we're happy to have such an experienced person with us. So DNR has, this is an interesting fact that I did not know, 1,204 employees and 1,000 contractual employees. So that's a lot of folks working for them, operating over 72 parks and marinas, 60 wildlife management areas and environmental areas that encompasses 475,000 acres of public land and 37,000 miles of public waterways throughout Maryland. So we're happy to have him here talk to us about the parks. He's going to talk about a bunch of different opportunities that people with disabilities have, about the accessibility in parks. So I'll turn it over to Richard. Before I do, I'll remind you to, if it's accessible for you, to type any questions you have in the chat box during the time that Richard's presenting. And then Richard, I'll be responsible for pulling those out and asking them to you at an appropriate, stopping of your speaking. And also, if that isn't accessible to you, please hit the raise your hand, which is at the bottom next to, you pull up participants list, and then you raise your hand next to your name or phone number, if you have your phone number on there. So we'll watch those. I ask you to be patient with me. It's this is not my first job, and so I'm not an expert, but we're working on it. So raise your hand or type things into the chat box, and we'll be sure you get we get to you. Richard, I'll let you take things out.
Okay, well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for being patient with me this particular day. This is a very fine opportunity for the Maryland Department of Natural Resources Office of Fair Practices to engage in some dialogues and questions and informational exchange on the program services and also the operations of the Maryland Department of Natural Resources. Actually, I think I had sent a couple bios to Sarah, but we're at about 1,300 permanent employees and maybe just a little over 800 employees in terms of the employees. And, we offer, of course, our natural resource program services and operations. For example, we offer services of fishing, hunting, camping, campsites, going out ADA accessible fishing platforms, things of that nature. And we offer a couple of complimentary items to our ladies and gentlemen with both disabilities, and I always like to say abilities as well as disabilities. The Office of Fair Practices, of course, again, we handle with the internal Civil Rights Unit, Equal Opportunity Unit, Maryland DNR, as we call it. And we also offer services. We investigate cases, allegations of employment discrimination. We handle requests from employees and members of the public for reasonable accommodations or adjustment of either the workplace or our facility services and programs, whether in the parks or wherever they may be located. And then we have a workplace mediation program and some other programs, training staff development. And then we promote workforce and cultural diversity, Black History Month, Women's History Month, National Disabilities Employment Awareness Month, Hispanic Heritage Month, American Indian Month also, and Asia Pacific American Heritage Month as well too. Just promoting minority groups and people of color, and people with disabilities and abilities, as I said. And those are some of our basic services. So one permit I want to talk to you about immediately, though, is our Universal Disability permit, UDF, Universal Disability permit. And what that is on a complimentary basis, we can offer the Universal Disability pass, as it's really called. That's what I was trying to say. If a member of the public fills out an application, and we do ask a few questions in terms of documenting disability. We keep this information confidential, and the person will fill out the application form and send it back in. They're going to be sending that back into our Maryland DNR licensing and registration service. And I was really surprised. Maryland DNR offers a large number of both licenses and permits. I never really realized that. And all of our license registration service offices now are located within the MVAs, Maryland Vehicle Administration offices, such as the one there in Annapolis and throughout the state of Maryland. So there's different ways to go about applying for the Universal Disability Pass, UDP. There's two types. There's an individual Universal Disability Pass for an individual with a physical impairment or any type of mental, emotional, developmental disability, whatever it may be. So you can apply as an individual, but I do want our independent centers in Maryland to know that also you can apply as a nonprofit 501c3 organization, which is a nice way to do it in terms of taking groups of people to our parks throughout the state of Maryland. We have a total of 76 parks, over 60 wildlife management areas, and people use those for hunting activities or therapy, cool out kinds of activities. And so that organizational 501c3 nonprofit group, Universal Disability Pass, is available to organizations that will qualify. You would apply for both of these types of Universal Disability passes to Ms. Amanda Wilson, who is our Director of the Licensing and Registration Service at the Maryland DNR. Her phone number is 410-260-3220 or 3282. And of course, she has a staff that works with her throughout the state of Maryland. People come in and apply for all kinds of licenses, fishing licenses, and so forth. And in addition, we also offer to our Maryland resident disabled American veterans the Disabled American Veteran DAV license, which would make the person qualified to, on a complimentary basis, to make avail of our fishing and our hunting areas as well too. And there's a process there too, of having both a hunting license and the Universal Disability Pass, UDP. So we always want to encourage people to come out. For example, we work very closely with, at our Sandy Point State Park facility, work very closely with a group called CRAB, that's the Chesapeake Region Accessible Boating Organization. They're also a member of our Maryland DNR Disability Advisory Council. And so many times people would like to come out to Sandy Point State Park and go out on the boats that are especially adaptive boats for folk with disabilities, abilities, as I was saying. And this is particularly geared at families with children who have disabilities, and also would be geared at our disabled American veterans, as I talked about, and then also for our low-income children of the area. So CRAB is a tremendous organization that developed some years ago by Mr. Donald E. Backey, who is a member of the DNR Disability Advisory Council and a former ADA coordinator like I am at Maryland Department of Natural Resources way back in the 1990s. So it was Donald's dream to develop an organization that would provide these services. We, taking the the participants out in various types of sailboats there to the Chesapeake Bay, so they can experience the beautiful Chesapeake Bay. And so Donald helped develop that program, working closely with Sandy Point State Park and the Maryland Park Service as well too. And so that exists now. And CRAB is working to develop a more independent and a differently located adaptive boating center. But there are different elements that work for funding, for the land involved, and to try to locate it on the, I think it's called the Back River of Annapolis. Beautiful facility that they're working towards the development of. And then we have a group of very dedicated people who work with us in the Maryland DNR Disabilities Advisory Council. Mr. Fred Cow is our chairperson, and he's a disabled American veteran from the Vietnam War, who's the former executive director of the Paralyzed Veterans of America. We have Larry T. Hughes. He's our Paralympic champion that's on our council and has a foundation that Larry runs to try to provide opportunities for young people with disabilities in athletic events. That's the Maryland Athletic Wheelchair organization, nonprofit organization. And we have a number of different people. Glenn Sayers actually works for the Maryland DNR's Wildlife and Heritage Service. He's on the council. Chastity Seymour, who now works with Montgomery County Recreation, and a number of people. Miss Mary Kane Bresty has been working with us. She is, with the Maryland Department of Health and the COP program. It's called the Maryland, well, that's with a small O, community of practice, working with people with different types of developmental disabilities. And she's been a wonderful addition. Mr. John Perkison, our former ADA Transition Plan Coordinator, who had more than 40 years at Maryland Department of Natural Resources in the engineering and parks departments, and worked with me to develop the very first Maryland DNR self-evaluation transition plans, which are required of us before we would apply for monies from the Maryland Department of Maryland Department of Disabilities, headed up by Secretary Carol Beatty. And then also our federal funders require a transition plan, an assessment of DNR's facility services and programs for people with disability in our efforts to work to try to, effectuate equity in our services for people with disabilities as well too.
So Richard?
And yes.
It's Sarah. I'm just going to stop you for 1 second because we have a bunch of questions about the disability pass, and I thought before we move on too far, you might want to answer those or repeat those.
Sure.
I believe I know the answer to the first one, but there's no cost to get that pass, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then
no cost.
Once someone has the pass, what does it allow them to do? Do they get into the park for free? What all does it include?
Right. The UDP, Universal Disability Pass, it allows the person, the applicant, and one other person to enter the DNR facility, the DNR park, or a DNR facility. If it is a facility that has a charge, not all DNR facilities or parks charge an entry fee, but a good number do, maybe 2/3 of them. So this pass would save the person maybe $4 or $5, a piece, and you'd have one other person with you. So you're permitted to have one additional person with you.
Okay. And does it cover does it eliminate any other costs, or is that the main one for the pass?
So just strictly for entry to the premises. For example, it's a different matter if a person wants, to camp, go camping on DNR facilities and other things, and then they would come under the system of pricing, for that, strictly for entry.
So just for entry. And then you and I actually talked about this when we talked ahead of time. I had a feeling the question would come up that some people have the National Parks Pass. That's for folks with disabilities, or sometimes members of the aging community also used to be able to get those passes. Does that work at the state parks, or do you need to have this? Do you need to have the specific Maryland Universal Disability Pass?
You need to have the specific Maryland DNR pass for Maryland DNR facilities and service. And you're right. There's federal programs from the National Park Service for entry, into the federal parks. The other thing is that this pass is good. Also, for people who live outside of the state of Maryland, they can apply for the Maryland DNR Universal Disability Pass. But the Maryland resident disabled American veteran license is different, and it's strictly for Maryland residents and those who have, military connected related disability.
Okay. So you've got to have both. Your national pass is not going to get you into state parks, is what you're saying.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And then what's the best phone number? Heather has brought up the DNR website is right on the page with the information on the Universal Disability Pass. What's the best phone number? I see on the right column, there's, regional service centers. Should people call if they need help or need more answers? Do they call their local or closest service center, or is there a main number they should call in regards to the Universal Disability Pass?
Well, yes, the headquarters office in Annapolis, that phone number is 410-260-3220 for Amanda Wilson, or 3282 for other members of staff. But you can be processed at the other license registration service centers that are located throughout the state of Maryland. And it would usually take, after you should be able to pull the application right from the website. I hope you can. And both the organizational UDP and also the individual UDP. But for the DAV, Maryland resident disabled American veteran license, they asked that the person would come in person to the facility and be processed on site.
Okay. A few more questions here. Do you happen to know if CRAB is open during COVID?
To my knowledge, CRAB is currently open. Certain events, of course, they are operating, wearing the mask, which is required, and as well as safe spacing of at least 6 feet apart from people, things of that nature. But they are, in fact, I just did actually had a press conference last week involving 3 secretaries of Maryland Department of Disabilities, of Maryland DNR, and also the Maryland Department of Veterans Affairs secretaries, and then Lieutenant Governor Lieutenant Governor Boyd Rutherford, as they were christening Adaptive Boating Month. June is Adaptive Boating Month. And we can get you more information. But yeah, Mr. Paul Bollinger is the executive director at CRAB. Works with us as well.
Okay. Do you know if there are hiking trails at Maryland parks that have Braille signage?
Braille signage. There's signage. I mean, depending on how you define rail, a sign connected to the rail, or what do you mean?
No, I think she's asking if you have signage or maybe maps that are done in Braille for people that want to hike who can't see the.
Oh, in Braille. I'm sorry.
Braille. Yeah, sorry.
I apologize on that. We currently do not. To be honest with you, we do not currently have those in Braille. So that's something we need to look into.
Okay. I bet you have some folks on this call who'd be happy to help you with that, should you decide to take that on.
Okay.
Is the UDP pass that you mentioned that's available to organizations, the sort of second version of it, is it also free to organizations, nonprofits?
Yes, it is. The thing there is and that application form is also up on the website now, along with the individual UDP application. There's some documentation asked for to verify your 501c3 nonprofit internal revenue status as a nonprofit group. Some documentation that is requested, and then that's sent back to Ms. Amanda Wilson and her staff of License Registration Service, and they would process it. Now, usually it takes anywhere between 7 to maybe even 10 days to get an applicant processed, just depending Right now, the licensing and registration services, I mean, they had been closed. You know, we're currently teleworking, but they're beginning a process of accepting appointments that will allow people to come into the facilities and to receive services. They're not fully open right now, but they're going into the process of reopening by appointment only.
Okay, so yeah, there's somebody asking about applying during COVID, but they can get the application on the website and complete it and submit it still during this time. But you may want to call the service center right before you go
Yes,
there
yes, ma'am.
to see,
Yes.
make an appointment. Then there's a question about when completing the UDP application, it asks for a child's doctor to certify the disability. Are neurological disabilities like high functioning autism considered to be qualifying disabilities?
Yes, ma'am. All types of disabilities that involve impairment of major life do qualify as distinguished from a medical condition, you know, that may or may not rise all the way up to being defined as a disability. But no, we do not differentiate, and we welcome people with all types of disabilities to our facilities.
Okay. And I think that may be it for the moment. I want to apologize to Fix that I was trying to read the phone number off of what Heather had posted and couldn't see it clearly. So I appreciate you, Lisa, for pointing out that the correct phone number to call the main service center is 410-260-3220 is what's on the website. And I was trying to read it and it was a little blurry for me. So I apologize. I had it wrong the first time. But
okay, or you know,
that is
also
most
go ahead,
questions we've had in a slew there. So I'm going to go back to letting you talk.
Oh, okay. Well, no, I was just going to give you Amanda Wilson's email also. It's amanda.wilson, AMANDA.wilson, WILSON, at Maryland, MARYLAND.gov. And that's the fastest way to try to get you processed. Also, if you have any problems, please call upon my office, the DNR Office of Fair Practices, and I'm at 410-562-6827 by cell phone, and I am teleworking currently.
All right, we're going to let you go ahead. I think that's answered all the questions for the moment.
Okay, so just to distinguish a little bit, I mentioned earlier the wildlife and heritage programs, and we have wildlife and heritage program centers located throughout the state of Maryland. That's headed up by a guy who works for us. His name is Paul Pedito, the director. And they too offer hunting. For example, and also just, I think I was trying to say therapy for people who just want to go out, you know, in the parks and, I mean, out in that case, wildlife and heritage areas. But with hunting, we have hunting programs, and we have it's called the Hunt from the Vehicle program. If we have any hunters out there, anybody's interested in hunting on Maryland DNR facilities. So you would use you apply for and gain the Universal Disability Pass, the individual pass for yourself. And then also you would need to get the hunting license, you know, and you gain that, of course, again, also through Maryland DNR's licensing and registration service. If you do not have a hunting license, then we would work with you because our Natural Resource Police has a hunter education program. And so you can gain information and training from the Natural Resource Police on hunting and hunt from our Hunt from the Vehicle areas. Those are specially designated areas within parks, also within forest area. We have a Maryland Forest Service, and then we also have the wildlife and heritage areas. So the Hunt from the Vehicle is like a specially designated area pathway, accessible pathway. And so we make that available to people to hunt. There's a process of applying for those items, and then also making a reservation to actually engage in the hunting activities. The other thing I want to say is that DNR is committed. We're trying to save the Chesapeake Bay, and we believe no child should be left inside. You know, we want the opportunities for families and children to get outside and enjoy all the great parks and wildlife heritage areas that Maryland does have to offer. And we have Chesapeake Bay programs, Chesapeake and Coastal Bay programs, boating and fishing. In addition, we even have something called Power Plant research program and natural resource assessment. So Power Plant gets into the issues of water and hydro and power, development of power. And they work closely also with something called the Maryland, doggone it, I'm going to remember it. I'm forgetting the name. There's a particular commission that works on them. I'll probably remember it later. Working, with the research Power Plant, a research program. I'd like to also invite everybody to come on out to our Harriet Tubman Park. We're very proud of the Harriet Tubman Park, part of the Harriet Tubman Gateway of connecting areas throughout the state of Maryland. Harriet Tubman was a great sister of the great state of Maryland, who was involved in, of course, coming back and freeing over 100 slaves after she herself had been enslaved. And that facility is down around the Cambridge area, and you can reach it and get to it off of Route 50 going east just before the Choptank River. It's a very beautiful interactive museum. We'll tell you all kinds of things about Harriet Tubman, and we should be accessible, to people with disabilities to coming in and enjoying that Harriet Tubman facility.
So Richard, one of the other things we had mentioned you would let us know about was if people go to a park, well, sorry, two questions. First one is, are there certain hours, are all parks reopened from, being closed for COVID? Is everything reopened now?
I believe that we are. I believe that most of our parks are reopened. And in fact, we have a very high number of people who've been visiting the parks. But again, within the confines, when I say open to basic activities, that was the fishing and the hunting, those types of things. But the buildings and so forth are not reopened. So because we're in the stage 2
right.
of this COVID-19 process. So you can enter a park or a wildlife and heritage area now, but you should be wearing a mask, of course, and also safe spacing, and just following the directions of our rangers and our different staff people.
Okay, thank you. And then if someone visits a park and finds something that's not accessible to them for, whether it's physically accessible or otherwise, who would they report that to? Would that be to you, or should they speak with the park ranger that day? What's your best advice on that?
My best advice is to do both. Speak with the park ranger on duty that particular day. Sometimes they will call about it as well too. And also to call our office again at 410-562-6827. And then we would take the complaint area and see what we can do about it. Our goal is access for all to all our facilities, services, and programs. It'd be inaccurate to tell you folks, though, that all of our facility services and programs are as totally 100% accessible. That's a goal at this point that we're in good faith are working towards. We also have the Maryland Department of Disabilities provides some funding for us to improve already existing structures. So that, one grant proposal per year. Maryland MDOD and Secretary Beatty and his staff through the Access Maryland program provides such funding. So at the Rocky Gap State Park, last year we completed through 8 interconnecting loops connected to the amphitheater, to the cabins, to the bathrooms, ADA accessible parking spaces, for example, too. That's a very big park in the west. That's down the way there. on Route 70, Allegheny County. It's one of our biggest parks, so particularly in Western Maryland, offering all kinds of services, camping services as well, and other things. So what we try to do through the Maryland DNR Disabilities Advisory Council and the Maryland DNR Office of Fair Practices is work to find the best ways we can to connect through pathways, to our services that we have available. We just completed at the Susquehanna State Park the Cohen House. The Cohen House is an ADA accessible public access office with an ADA accessible restroom, a pathway, and an ADA accessible van space. So we completed that project. It's just got done at $123,500, again, from our friends at MDOD. The project, going back to Rocky Gap State Park, I think it's $543,500. That's our biggest project to date. But in addition to that, and let me just say, we can only do this working with the Maryland DNR's engineering construction staff, with Linda Steinmetz, our AD accessible architect, Perry Otwell is the director of engineering construction, and then we also work closely as much as we can with the Maryland Park Service planners and other DNR employees. And we're always available to receive input on how we can better our programs and services and render our facilities more ADA accessible. So we have a maintenance improvement program run by engineering construction, and we have a capital program for brand new construction. But the larger number of DNR buildings are older, number of our older facilities. And that's where the Access Maryland program comes in for improvements of already existing structures. So my grandfather was an engineer back in the day, the industrial engineer. And so it's been interesting interacting with our architects and engineers over the years, and also our Disabilities Council of Advocates from different parts of the state. By the way, we are looking for new recruits to the Maryland DNR Disabilities Advisory Council, which meets 4 times yearly, and I can provide more specifics on that. And in particular, we want to recruit more people with disabilities to our council. But it does meet 4 times a year with some work in between that. And we're looking for good folks with disabilities, or even those without disabilities, to come aboard and help us keep up our awareness, first of all, and of all of the disability laws, rules, and regulations, and then how we can better our facilities as a whole.
Great. Well, thank you. I want to open up and make sure we don't have more questions. There's one more question about where you can find a list of state parks, but I think Heather's bringing that up on the website. So it's dnr.maryland.gov. And on the very front of that page, the first tab is Find a State Park, and it has the state park directory. I'm sure looks like Heather's about to paste that into the chat so that you have an easy way to navigate there. Does anyone have any further questions for Richard?
Okay.
Keeps bringing up the list of Maryland state parks that have adaptive recreation equipment. So I'm thinking that
that was new to me. I think that's interesting. I didn't realize that was available. What would be the process if people wanted to request more adaptive? I see it looks like you have a campsite wheelchair platform at one of the state parks at Pocomoke, but what about the other parks?
There are other parks, not all of them, but there are a number of parks who do have an ADA accessible beach chairs. Some of the parks have beaches, by the way. Greenbrier would be one, for example, with a beautiful beach along with the park. So all you have to do is make contact with our ranger station and make a reservation to use the ADA accessible wheelchair, through different portions connecting within the park.
It looks like
the other thing we had, could I just say this also? I should have said it, I'm sorry. We strive to make to render our playgrounds, for children with disabilities ADA accessible.
there seem to be a number of parks listed that have the all-terrain, wheelchairs, which is very helpful when you want folks to be able to get closer down into the water. Cunningham Falls, Deep Creek Lake, Harrington Manor and Pocomoke River all have those. Oh, that's a Rocky.
Yes.
Sorry. Yeah. So there's a lot of places that have the wheelchairs. Do you have to do that ahead of time, or can you do it when you get there?
I think it's better if you make your reservation ahead of time. And the other thing is, if you have any questions about the facilities or anything in writing it's not clear, please call, again, the DNR Office of Fair Practices, and we'll talk with you, give you what information we have. Or if we don't know the answer, then we'll go to the ranger or the person who more than likely would have the answer and could really help out.
Okay, and there's one more question. I think I might know the answer to this one, but I'll let you answer. You're the expert. Are there any boats that accommodate power wheelchairs? That's kind of back to the crab boating folks.
Crab is probably the best the best example when you say boats, but and those are sailboats, by the way, not necessarily power boats. Certain parks have programs related to the utilization of power boats and different types of boats, which I'm not a total expert on. But in certain lakes, for example, or certain water-related facilities that a power boat would be permitted at, but not all situations permit. Out of all 76, parks throughout the state would permit power boats all the time.
Great. Who again should folks contact if they're interested in being on the advisory council? Is that you, Richard?
Yes, ma'am. If you would, folks, if you'd contact me, and I'd be happy to, give you more specifics about what's involved in it. And we're the recipient of federal funding, and as a recipient of federal funding, and just because we want to serve our customers in the best way that we can, it's important that we receive input from people with disabilities, on our facility services and programs, and how we can improve our facility services and programs, and how we can reach out to our customers who happen to have disabilities, and I'm going to say abilities. One last thing, just that it's a real pleasure touching base with Maryland's independent centers. And I used to be a little more active with independent centers when I lived in Los Angeles, California, in the Crenshaw area out there. But this only reminds me, as we try to reach out to our different types of organizations out there, that we have to do the best we can, to disseminate the information as effectively as we can. And I greatly admire what you're doing, the independent centers of the great state of Maryland. And this radio, this broadcast, is a great example of great people trying to serve their clients, the needs of their clients. I'm told we have over 60 million people now in the country who happen to have disabilities and abilities. And I actually don't know the number in terms of Maryland, but Maryland is reaching out to try to serve our people with disabilities. This, and now a probably even more limited budgetary situation is probably coming up, but we will continue to do the best we can do.
Well, thank you so much. You've certainly answered everything. Oh, and thank you. Amanda Taylor just posted also information about the downtown sailing center in Baltimore City, in case that happens to be closer for somebody than going out to Annapolis. So there's several places that people can do boating and sailing accessibly. So
yes.
Doing that. All right.
Very good.
Any last words, Richard, or we probably need to do our closing? And I know I see at least one delegate on the call. Delegate Bel Castro is on, so I just want to be sure to recognize her. But
excellent.
And we'll just let Lydia close things up for us. Thank you so much, Richard.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Richard and Sarah. That's great information. And we love bringing this valuable information to our Marylanders with disabilities every week. This work is really important. It's a great avenue to disseminate information. And these programs are really not funded. So if you can in any way contribute financially, please do so. You can do that right at the registration form when you register for next week's call, which we would love to have you next week as well. And next week we actually have Cecilia Warren from Director of Emergency Preparedness at the Department of Disabilities. And she will talk to us about creating emergency plans, what is missing, how can you improve your emergency plan, especially now in the time of coronavirus, what is changed, what is different. So we would love to have you on next week as well, and you'll get more information about that later this week. Unless there's any other announcements from any other agencies or anybody on the call, I'll give you a few seconds maybe if anybody has any announcements. No, well, thank you so much.
Quiet week, Lydia.
Thank you, everybody.
Maybe.
Thank you, everybody, and have a great week. We hope to see you next week. And goodbye. Take care and stay safe.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Take care. Have a good one.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
See you in the ionosphere again sometime.
Texted me, but I didn't know if that would create a problem.
Hang on, let me just get out of here. Oops.
Hey, Heather, are you still there?
Yep, I'm here.
Hey, can you do me a favor? If you can you email me those